today is the Hello World Plus project. Basically, we call them dummies that we use for benchmark software composition analysis tools. So generally speaking, we had this notion, also Marcel in the past several years being part of the open chain automation work group, is this idea for the open source management for everyone, this OSM program that basically people with like-minded people with diverse knowledge, background and whatnot from different work groups, communities, to work together and to create this basically a testing ground for SCA tools. And as you can see, these are basically some well-known communities that work together to create this basically ecosystem toolchain. And as I mentioned, Marcel is a member of the Open Chain Automation Work Group, and the Open Group in itself is, again, a group of people that really focuses on creating this ecosystem that really wants to allow people and to foster this data collection and the dummy projects to be used in a way to benchmark and test your software composition analysis tools. And you can do this on your own. You can do this as part of your day-to-day job, your activities, your hobbies, and whatnot. So in terms of what we really want to show today are really the benefits of having something like this. So it will be beneficial for the vendors and the service providers, it will be beneficial to the users, and it will be beneficial to the expert community. Why? On your own, if you're, for example, a simple user, you can install a public version of the tool. You can use the public dummies to actually test the tool, to benchmark it, to inject it with vulnerabilities or some code that you have issue with, and basically compare one scan of a project that is really the default scan, and then to have a scan for your particular custom scenario. For vendors, it could be used for debugging and testing, for benchmarking, for testing irregular behavior. For the expert community, it could be something like a reference to what you can and cannot do. Again, some sort of a benchmark for the available tools, and it could be used in training and education. And I'll hand over to Marcel to actually explain the whole idea behind it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're doing open source management based on open source now nearly since a decade. We started this also with Philippe and Julian at the next stage. We're there since the beginning. And while we're also using this internally, we have tons of projects, different heterogeneous projects that we run every day, dozens of pipelines running internally. And while we, to be honest, started in the beginning to have our projects as beta testers, we said, okay, we need to get better. We need also to make a qualification before we deploy. And internally, we already try to use some dummy repositories. And that was then a great chance to say, and this was already discussed in the FOSDEM beginning of the year, also beginning at the end of last year, say, why shouldn't we do this together? This is a great opportunity, especially as no one can be specialist for everything. The other aspect, and this was now here the idea, also if we make this public, then we can talk about it, like the benefits that Nicola just mentioned. And so the idea came up to say, okay, what about if we would have such a public supply chain simulated? Because as I said, I'm part of OpenChain, and at the end, the whole supply chain profits, right? If everyone in the chain has the same capabilities to do the security checks, to do the compliance scans. And here is this picture at the lower right side, from your side. So this is from the OpenChain supplier guide. It's very small, but you can check it in the OpenChain documentation, where it says, okay, there is this example. If something goes wrong, then obviously, well, it will also end up at the user with some irregularities. And in a fine world, and you will see this later, well, you have no bugs and you will not find anything. With our tools, we want to detect those things. We want to detect the security vulnerabilities, the compliance issues, export control issues, etc. But how do we then check if our tools are really working correctly? And so if we go to the next slide, the special challenge that we had is that, as I said, we do not only have one team doing Java or something like that, but here you see from the Octoverse report all those top languages from last year. So I guess this year will be more or less the same, but with different numbers. And here we managed, at least now, to already open source 2 of those dummies for Java and Go, so that we can now use for showcases, for going into discussions, and using this all together for the qualification for the testing of our supply chain. The next thing is that, so how does such a dummy repository look like? Because if we want to collaborate, we need a kind of platform or standard how we do this. So this is also what we managed now in the last months to set it up, so that we have a clear structure. So how does the dummy repository look like? What would we expect as branches where we put our tests or showcases in? And also here, like in the further slide, that's the call to action, right? Here we need your support, we need your input. On the one side, we need more, dummy repositories for other languages, additional languages to cover really the whole range. On the other side, here is also your opportunity. So therefore, we made it, right? So that we have a kind of guidance. If you provide a new case, a showcase, how you can easily contribute that to one of those dummy repositories, whatever language you will prefer then. Yeah. And coming back now to the main idea, with that we could cover already the left side, right? So where we simulate then the upstream project. So you typically, as we have 85%, as we heard, of software is anyway open source. So then we can say, okay, let's simulate that at the beginning. Yeah. Then going to the next point on the setup, here now to simulate then the middle part. Okay, if I have such a repository and I want to know what's inside using an SCA, what can I use, right? So this is typically then what everyone needs to know. Okay, now do I have to buy something from a vendor, or are there other possibilities? Here, 2 points were directly by just putting this dummy repository in the GitHub. Okay, this is no open source, but it's publicly available as onboard feature. Is here the dependency graph that you need to activate, and then you directly see from the dummy, okay, here are all the dependencies. You can even export an SBOM and SPDX. This is one vendor, if you want, right, that you can directly test. Well, if I have this, if I have my dummy repository, does dependency graph already detect all my transitive dependencies? Others that are publicly available tools to test, for example, if you rather have cases where you want to check your license and copyright things, that would be a Fossology server that is publicly available that we could already use then to just make some showcases. Okay, if I have a dummy with an injected copyright that should not be there, or a specific license, then you can already use the Fossology public server to just make such a test case. And perhaps going back to the slide, what we're currently planning, because we're heavily working, as some might know, on the OSS review toolkit. Now in the Eclipse Apoapsis, we also contributed a ORT server to run that at scale, and here we also plan to have an a publicly available test server for that, so that also it's more convenient for everyone to just, if you want to play around or just want to look at something, that you can also do that on that end. And here, if all the other vendors, suppliers from open source tools, you will also be welcome to prepare a possibility that we can also include this in this whole supply chain simulation. Yeah, and so here ticking the second box, so with this we simulate then this supplier, the software vendor in the middle, right? Coming from the upstream dummy repository that is reused, that creates a derivative work that we will simulate. Then you use this SCA tooling or any scanner, whatever, on top of it. And that leaves us then the third point. And here there is also an update so that we have now, for example, as I said, in ORT, OSS Review Toolkit, where you can create automatically an SBOM, either in SPDX or CycloneDX. And here with this, we can also simulate the handover from a software supplier to the manufacturer. That also with the CRA, we have those requirements. Say, and then the question is how it looks like. So, and here the point is now for this simulation, if you go to the next slide, first of all, you want to have then a case where you can really simulate now what happens if there is a vulnerable dependency. What happens if there is a snippet from a copyleft licensed portion in my own code? What happens then? You can not only see this then in the repository, you can then also see this from the perspective of a software supplier. You can also see this, how it will have an effect in the SBOM. And you can then also see this in those dashboard tools, for example, that consuming the SBOM. So you would have really this whole thing open source, all publicly available, so that if you want, you could then ideally copy paste the whole thing, use it at home, or well, use it with your own thing. And that is exactly the idea, that we will also have the possibility that we can then also share experience on, hey, how is now this specific case handled with this tooling? How does it look like if it is later then shown in my product dashboard with all my SBOMs? And so with this, we would have all three boxes ticked. So we laid the base now. We have a platform to do this, and would invite everyone, to join the activity by contributing, right? So because this is really a joint thing that we all need to do together, and we need your contributions. And in order to show how that could look like, Nicola will give a short showcase of how it could look like.
Thank you, Marcel, for really going through the general idea and what this is all about. So the showcase in itself, as of basically today, we did some last-minute updates to properly showcase how this is done. So we will start with basically our happy case, as we call it. So this is pretty much a straightforward Java Maven dummy project. So you can install your ORT locally. You can test it on your own. We actually advocate that, so you can really use and try to do this on your own. So we've taken this Java Maven dummy, we installed ORT and scanned the master branch. All of this is publicly available, so you can follow the links to the dummy project, to the ORT installation documentation, and basically also to the open source compliance tooling group, where you can find all the various different tools also that you can use. But generally, back to this showcase and this happy case, as we call it. Here we've shown basically the initial email results that you will receive after successfully scanning the master branch. And you have all the information for the scan itself, and you have all the supporting reports and documentation that you generally get scanning any other project with ORD. Here we are focused on the scan web app report, and it shows basically the information. At the very top, you have a summary for whether you have any technical issues, whether you have any policy violations, pending files in your snippet scanner, and any security vulnerabilities. So here, with the initial step, we have basically nothing is found. We have, apart from a few files pending in the snippet scanner that needs to that you have to declare. Here, everything seems quite fine. There are no vulnerabilities, no policy violations. And this is basically how the results look like. So if you open your scan web app report, you get a summary, you get a dependency tree, and in the dependency tree, basically, you can see all of the list of your dependencies. And for more additional information, also, you can follow the background to see the Eclipse ApoApsys blueprint that we have for that particular showcase that's shown here. But this is pretty much a straightforward example of what scanning your project would actually produce with ORD, and if everything is fine with it. And now,
concerning the benchmark, that ideally should look like the dependency graph that you get
so
from
basically,
GitHub.
that's your foundation for benchmarking, generally speaking, and this is like having a clean project, more or less. I mean, if you don't count the pending files in your snippet scanner. However, if we go now to actually benchmarking your custom branch, in the documentation for the dummy project, we basically advocate this use to have your main or master branch, and to have your custom branch where you actually do the benchmarking and where you inject your vulnerabilities and whatever issue that you have, some custom code, as Marcel mentioned earlier, something that you've picked from Stack Overflow and you inject it in your code just to make sure that the tool picks it. And what we showcase here, again, publicly available. All the links you can follow when you get the slide deck. And here, generally, the way to do it, it's pretty much the same. However, as I've already mentioned, you create your custom branch where you will use for benchmarking. You add your dependency. For example, this is a Java Maven project, so you add the dependency to your POM XML file, and then you scan with ORD. So you run ORD, you get a result again to your email, and as you can see there, you now have 4 security vulnerabilities. And these 4 security vulnerabilities look like this in your web app report. So you open the web app report, and in the vulnerability section or tab, you can actually open and see all the vulnerabilities that are detected. And you can use this in a way to, again, to benchmark straight up what is your default project and something like a custom branch that you created for that specific testing. And the results, again, you can basically see the Walk4j that is a benchmarking done by Marcel. And you can see the Walk4j that was injected, and it's picked up by ORD. And all the information for the CVEs is actually available in the report. From there on out, I don't know whether you noticed, but from the various reports that you are provided, you also get a CycloneDX format of your SBOM. And actually, you can get that CycloneDX SBOM and upload it to your dependency track. And with dependency track, you can actually build a dashboard, and that dashboard for you can use to monitor several projects at a time, and to check their information based on the uploaded SBOMs. That could be fully automated. And again, we advocate the public use, so you can basically follow the link and install the public version of dependency track and test this on your own. And again, a reference to the open source tools as an alternative. And for this is what basically the dashboard of dependency track looks like when you've actually uploaded several SBOMs. And as I mentioned, in this way, you can actually monitor several projects at a time with different vulnerabilities or different issues that you try to test and benchmark. And For example, if you are working on several projects at a time, you can create this on your own and actually monitor several completely different projects at a time and to maintain what's going on with that. And again, we do a reference to our talk later in the today in the afternoon regarding Eclipse Apoapsis. There is a blueprint for the product dashboard that you can use, and again, it's a public information. We also advocate the free and public use of that. With the showcase done, I'm handing over back to Marcel to do a quick summary of what we talked about just today.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we just used now those tools because they were just at hand, I would say. You could also replace all those tools on your own. I think those special use cases where this is very handy if you install a complete infrastructure for the first time and you want to know, well, did I do everything all right? Are all the databases correctly linked, etc.? And you could just use one of those example showcases from a dummy repository, run through it and say, yes, the expected result is there. We observed in the last years a lot of migrations from tools, so the one or the other might also have experienced that. This is also pretty handy if you say, okay, now before with my old legacy infrastructure, I got those results. Now if I switch over to the new infrastructure I may create and run the same thing again, then you can also be sure, okay, it still behaves the same way. I think this is a very important thing. The other thing is, as I mentioned in the beginning, we want to have this public simulation where and if we talk about vendors from the open source tooling side, right, we talk about open source. So our tool vendors are our mates from the Eclipse, from Nextbee, from whoever, the open source tools, where we can also use that to reproduce, for example, specific behavior. We said, hey, Philippe, scan code behaves here a little bit strange. And he asked, well, can you reproduce this? And I say, okay, here I made a branch, I made a showcase in the dummy and run it and be able to reproduce it. Same for OSS Review Toolkit, for Sology, etc. Next slide. Yeah. And here we would, if you now say, yeah, well, I also have such cases that are interesting, then we welcome you to contribute that. I have a little wish list here compiled as we're, well, obviously we showed the Java Maven because that's a kind of no-brainer since years for us now. Embedded C, C++ is a little bit more tricky. And I think there are also much more showcases that you can have. Also the Yocto or other Linux systems might be interesting, especially also as showcases for a joint discussion that we could start on this. Because on the one side, we can use it for testing and showcasing. On the other side, we can also use it for example, we compiled a list of, let's say, interesting dependencies where we said, okay, well, where even the tool vendors, or if we discuss this in the tooling group, we said, how shall we handle things like that, right? And if we want to get better, I think if we have this common foundation, that might be very good. We get a lot of questions about containers. I guess you as well, if you're from the OSPO. And export control is also, I think, potentially low-hanging fruit if we look at what here Scanos contributed to the SPDX, where you have a nice list of cryptography algorithms, where we said, okay, are those tools now really capable to detect it? Well, and just use, or if we would have it, we could just use such a dummy with all those different cryptography simulations, and then just check, yes, all found, done. And my personal favorite there would be an AI dummy. Why? Because it's a little bit different, right? With all this data and models and weights, etc. As I think we mentioned that also in the benefit, that you can also use this for training, right? Because when people came to me and say, hey, can you show me how that works? Typically, I had to use some customer project to showcase that, and this was also not very cool. So now here I have a neutral ground, I have something that's really public. I can just use that also for training and making those trainings much more sustainable, and especially in AI, I think we can use this a lot then in the future, because here's still a new field. For the next steps that are very concrete is that, we kudos to the Jenkins Docker team who already provided here the Java Maven dummy. Here we have then the other dummies, also the Go dummy, I think we will update so that we can really have the first showcases ready to use. And we want to ideally, because if in the open chain tooling group, we provide or we contribute and try to maintain then the base. Yeah, but you would then ask, hey, can I really have a test case specification for that? And on that abstract level, because we're tool agnostic at that point, as I said, you can use these dummies with every tool that you want to have, and we can only also on a very generic level say, okay, what's the expected results? Obviously, if I feed vulnerable dependency, then you can specify my expected result is that the vulnerability is detected. But what is potentially more interesting than if you use a specific tool, like for example the OSS Review Toolkit or the ORT server, then how concretely does the result look like? So if I inject now this showcase that we did with the log4j, then I expect exactly this in the report. So we can also do, for example, then robot framework, automated regression testing, etc., things like that. And so then we would really have the complete set where I said, okay, here we have the generic test set that we can for Fossology, for ORT server, etc., then also provide, hopefully next year latest, then say, look, now we leverage this, and then this will also help, I think, the communities to improve their tooling, to improve their integration and user-facing tests.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I may add a few things to what Marcel already said. You can see the list of our wishes basically for the various dummies that fall into the different topics. Specifically, what Marcel mentioned as Philip from Nixby, the previous talk that he had. We had this discussion in the past that not many, for example, SAE tools do everything from start to finish. So you cannot, for some dummies, you cannot really test a tool to its full potential, or vice versa. You can actually show what is the tool's drawbacks, especially for containers and for embedded Linux. We've had experience with trying to get a comprehensive software composition analysis with a few tools, and we never get something done to the fullest, and something to have a really comprehensive SBOM. So this is why we have this wishes, is to probably try to push also the providers to improve their tooling, so everyone can actually benefit from it. But generally speaking, thank you really for attending. You can follow the QR codes to the tooling group website, where you can find the full ecosystem of tools, and as we already mentioned, to test this and the showcases that we did with not just ORT, but any other tool that has public access to it. I know, for example, Scanos, when they did their presentation, their full data set is open source. And for example, that's another tool that you can probably use for trying to reproduce any of what we did so far. And probably time for some questions if you.
And we meet twice a month, so every first and third Wednesday. So if you want, just join us. Here's also the link to the meeting dates in the Open Chain calendar. It's also, the one is in the morning, the other is in the afternoon. So depending on if you're a night owl or early bird, then you should find something.
Time
and
for
you're
everyone.
welcome to join our discussions there.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, just raise a hand. Okay. I guess not.
Yeah, then it's lunchtime. Right?
Okay. Then thank you again, and have a nice lunch.